What's up guys, this is Characters for tabling 50 NL video today. I'm just making this as a kind of filler in between series. I'm producing loads of vids today before I go away on holiday to Italy, so I thought one of them should just be our typical live vid that comes up once every 3 or 4 videos. I got table 2 here. This is like a Monday afternoon, but nevertheless we have like a really fishy table here. It feels like a Sunday to me. I just can't get it out of my head that this is not Sunday, so if you hear me talk about how this is Sunday, then yeah, just excuse that. It just feels so much like a Sunday. To me, it's unbelievable. So here we ISO'd a limper and we made it 5x, and the reason I went 5x pre-flop here is that behind me there are like 3 or 2 at least other fish. And when you have loads of fish behind you, your ISO sizing should really be bigger, because what you're trying to do when you ISO, well, you're trying to achieve multi-way pot. Prevent rather multi-way pot situations. You're trying to like get one of the fish heads up to yourself so that you can be the sole beneficiary of the mistakes that they make after the flop. And so, or benefactor maybe, the one who benefits from it is what I'm trying to say. And so it's good when you have fish behind you, although they're not actually limpers in the pot, they are definitely going to be increasing the likelihood that you're going to see multi-way pots. So to go 5x in a spot like this, I'll just show you what I'm talking about, is pretty important, I think, because like you would up your sizing, right, if more than one fish limped, you're kind of predicting the presence of the other fish in the pot, and you're making it 5x because you expect one of, or if not both of these two, to come along very, very often if you make it 4x. So that kind of makes it harder for you to achieve your aim of getting one of the fish heads up, or taking the pot down, or giving yourself fold equity after the flop. Like, why do we isolate? What are we trying to achieve? Well, one, we're trying to, like I say, become the one who benefits solely from the fish's mistakes, and secondly, we want to be heads up so that we can actually get more fold equity post flop with our continuation bets. Most hands miss most flops, as you guys know in No Limit Hold'em, so having fold equity with your C bets is really important. There I was just bet calling the turn on table 2 because I open fish calls in a big blind. I bet flop for value, really standard. The turn, I mean, there's not very much left. I'm just betting, just making sure my sizing sets up stacks to get it all in by the river, basically. So yeah, absolutely excited and pumped to be getting away from the Scottish weather. I mean, we just haven't had summer here yet. It's been like really miserable. Weather will pop up here and you can see like 13 degrees Celsius at the start of June, clouds. That's a good day. So it's going to be nice to be in Italy and sort of be back there, get to practice my Italian skills, or lack thereof, having forgotten it all, and get some good food, some sea, some sun, all those good things that comes with life in the Mediterranean. So that'll be fun for a week. Then back to work as always. Update with me, what have I been up to? Writing a poker book is basically taking up most of my time right now. I'm putting loads of effort into that. I'm trying to create like this textbook for No Limit Hold'em's technical game that's hopefully going to be, you know, somewhat revolutionary, I hope, like something that's not been done before, and like covering the game in a way that just hasn't really been achieved prior to that, like really thoroughly making sure that every situation possible is kind of covered to at least some extent. So it's very systematic. I'm kind of going through the entire game of No Limit Hold'em, spot by spot, building up our pre-flop game, building up our post-flop game, understanding how to play all the various different situations and what factors are relevant. Hopefully it's going to be good. I'm definitely looking forward to that coming out. I'm going to just check fold here on table 1. I could c-bet this flop, but the problem is that I don't have a hand that has too much equity here. Like, sure, I have a few backdoor draws. I'm going to actually check and just bet river for sort of thin value, I was going to say, for as a bluff, basically, with the absolute worst showdown value possible. It makes sense, I think. If I'm going to have a range that checks twice and then bets river, I think it makes sense for 3 high to be a part of that range. We'll get called here sometimes when he's like pot controlling, like jacks or whatever. But this is not a line that most people take as a bluff, so betting 4 into 7 here is consistent with a bunch of my range, like pocket jacks, 10x, that kind of thing, just sort of thin value bet. And hands I could make him fold, things like sort of ace jack, just like random like ace highs basically, and king highs. Gonna go ahead and squeeze on table 2 just to isolate these fishes. Hopefully isolate one of them. This guy seems to be opening fairly wide from under the gun, so I don't mind taking a hand as weak as king jack off and actually adding that to my 3-bet value sort of linear isolation range. The problem with a flop like 5-3-2 is just that fold equity is kind of limited on it from better hands. Sure, he can fold like some random overs here that I dominate and things like that, but when he has ace high here, if you think about our opponent's range on table 2, when he has ace high, he's probably just never really folding the flop. I might be able to get him off ace high by the turn or river, but he also has a bunch of pairs in his range as well. So do I really want to start barreling multiple streets against the fish here? And he may just call flop and turn with ace high as well, and then I'm in a spot where I'm having to triple. So I think with this much showdown value and there being quite a few good turns for us, this is just fine to check back, given our showdown value is pretty limited. Queen's not the best card in the world. It does give us a bit more equity. I think this is a call for this price. Again, not really expecting him ever to fold a hand like the ace of hearts or like queen x or a pair plus a heart. So I think just calling and trying to get there on the river is good. If he checks river, I'm not convinced that we'd have a profitable bluff, to be honest, against the fish. There's just too many hands that are likely to have a pair by now, and they're just check calling, I think. Although it might not be horrible. Okay, I'm going to see about my whole range on table 1. When you min open the button, right, and the reg calls you in the big blind, both of you have an extremely wide range. And what that means is, for the guy out of position who's facing the c-bet here, even though you're like betting like your entire range on this flop, because that's my strategy, it's still going to be very, very hard for him to do anything about it, because his range is actually weaker than mine. I have more 10x than him, probably because I'm opening all the 10x in the button. He's probably 3-betting like ace 10 maybe, and also maybe not, but he's possibly 3-betting ace 10 and is not calling with as many terrible 10x as I'll be opening, most likely. And I probably have more 6s as well, and I have all the big pairs, so my range is better than his. It's going to be very hard for him to do anything about just a very small c-bet there. You can see my sizing was not very big, because it's just going to be kind of impossible for him to defend enough of his range there in any kind of coherent way. And because I have position, if he starts like over defending there in the long run and like raising me on that board, it's going to be very easy for me just to not fold, and he's going to have a tough time actually playing back there plus EV. So just a spot that intrinsically favors the pre-flop raiser, i.e. us being in position there in a spot where we just shouldn't have a range that checks back and then just folds the turn. That's just not something we need to have there. It's just more plus EV to bet everything. Yeah, so it's good to think in these spots, not just about how you play your hand, but about how you're playing your range and what actually makes sense here, what his range is like. Have a look at the sort of range versus range side of things, and that can give you a really good idea what your strategy should look like against the reg when you're kind of branching out and playing in a more balanced way, where you're thinking about the bigger picture. And I'm actually, like, in my book, I'm kind of introducing that this thought process of like, how do I play my range here? How do I make sure I'm not exploitable? What's a good long-term strategy with my whole range against the reg? I'm introducing that slowly in my book, so by the start, I mean, we don't touch on that kind of thinking too much, apart from in the very common pre-flop spots. We just look at the factors in a vacuum. What's the best way to play, basically. Knowing how to assess what makes a play good or bad in a vacuum comes first, and then sort of expanding. So in the book, I'm trying to like introduce that really gradually, not sort of lump the reader with it all at once, because I mean, it is something that you need to know by the time that you're playing higher stakes and actually dealing with competent regulars, but it's not something you need to know right off the bat. Certainly if you don't know how to think about things in a vacuum, you'll confuse yourself horribly and just be playing awfully, trying to get this long-term strategy nailed and balance your range and all these kind of things. So a couple of interesting spots here. I make this on table 2 a bit bigger pre-flop. I went to like 165. I'm just going to fold this flop. Honestly, like, my hand is just second best here way, way, way too often. I don't quite have enough equity when behind to call. If I had like maybe an overcard with my 7, like I had like ace 7 with the backdoor flush draw, would be a bit closer, but I think this is just a fold at 7-6. Going to go ahead and c-bet the queens and call the 6s on table 3. The reason I'm c-betting here, I mean, you'll see people check back here and say, okay, I've got the board kind of crushed, so I'm going to check back. But this guy's fold to 3-bet, c-bet rather, is only 33% so far, over 200 hands. Doesn't tell us too much, but it also means that, you know, all the times I want to c-bet air here, it's good to have pocket queens in my range too, and I'm not completely crushing that board. Like, okay, I make it unlikely that he has queen x, but he can have so many draws there and just like medium pairs that are definitely calling the flop that it's not the case. It's not like the board is queen 4-4 rainbow and I'm just completely crushing the deck or anything like that. So betting there and building the pot, I think, is way more important than any kind of line where we try and slow play. King 10, I'm going to fold because it's just too likely I get multiple pots on this table, which is not really ideal for me. Queen Jack, I probably should just 3-bet that against the fish, just add that to part of my linear range. I just kind of hit fold without really realizing. I'm going to make big sizing here on table 3 because I'm betting all my bluffs here. I'm just going to go ahead and c-bet the 7-4-3 of hearts board. When he does not have a heart here, just has 2 random overs, he's going to fold. I'm giving myself an okay price on this, and I do have some equity to win a showdown against Ace of Hearts X that calls me here sometimes, or even to improve the 2 pair of trips. And I'm going to check fold this turn because this is not a part of my range that I need to continue with. It's pretty much the worst hand in my range that I'm going to c-bet here. Even a hand like Ace X of Hearts is like a bazillion times better than this, and you could make an argument for check folding the flop. I just think I have enough immediate fold equity against those overcards that don't contain hearts. Like half the time his overcards there are not going to have a heart in them, and that's quite a big chunk of his range. And if I bet 450, I'm only needing folds, sort of like if I bet 2/3 pot, I need folds about 40% of the time for that c-bet to be better than check folding the flop, given I'm not really going to be able to win the pot very much by check folding there at all. And so I believe that the c-bet there is just the best line. I think it's going to be slightly more profitable in a vacuum than checking, and I think that when I have like a pair, it's going to be okay to have that as part of my c-bet range, although it's kind of close and check folding would be okay. Here we go ahead and 3-bet and get cold called by a fish. And then we get the red comes along as well. I could like check call here, but I just have absolutely no idea what this guy's frequencies are going to be to like take a stab at this here. And I think it just caps my range on a board that I want to c-bet with a lot of air anyway, with a lot of like non-made hands. So I think just keeping my range consistent, I can get called by worse hands from the fish sometimes as well, is going to be the best plan here. This fish can have like jacks, 10s, that kind of thing. I'm actually going to check fold the turn just because he has called the flop with someone else behind and he looks quite passive. So therefore I expect if he does have that medium pair kind of range that I'm ahead of, that he's going to check this turn back a lot of the time, and then I can consider like thin value betting river or whatnot. But when he actually bets turn, I think it's more likely he has like king, queen, ace, king, pocket aces that he slow play pre-flop, some flush draws. The odd hand that I beat that randomly bets, but against that range overall, I'm not going to be able to check call out position there and play the river. I just don't have enough equity. Slash realizable equity that I can actually get to showdown with. So I think c-betting that flop and check folding the turn is the way to go there. I think it's probably the best line. In a spot where, you know, no line is obviously great or anything like that. Queen 6 is good enough for me just to ISO the small blind limper. It's not technically an isolation raise, I just call it an ISO because we raise after someone has limped, and that's just generally the way the term is used these days. The idea being that he's just going to have to fold either pre-flop or under flop an enormous amount of the time. We have like a queen in our range, so we're going to be doing okay there. 6-4, a very easy call, getting great pot odds there. 6 deuce is also going to be a call because there are 2 fish in the pot, although I'm not like thrilled about it. But for that price, I don't quite think we can fold. This guy might be a weaker player. In any case, like 2.5x open on table 4 is going to be a good size here because he has 3-betting some amount. I think Jack 8 is good enough that I do want it in my opening range, but I don't want to go like too big. I think it'd be a mistake to lead on table 3 because there are just 4 players in the pot. There's way too much chance that we don't have any fold equity at all, and our pot equity doesn't compensate for 0 fold equity. Our pot equity here would be okay if we had like some fold equity to go with it, but we just don't really have that in a 5-way pot, so check folding this bad draw is going to be the way forward. The draw really is like the worst of the worst in that situation. If I had a hand like Queen 10, I might consider either leading or check calling, depending. I think, again, it's a spot where you just don't have any fold equity, so seeing a free turn is like pretty good if that can ever happen. And you might have implied odds against weak players to actually check call that flop if I had like a better draw. So I'd probably go that way. But if you make that spot on table 3 3-way instead of 5-way, a lot more hands in my range just become leads because my fold equity just goes way up. Ace Queen against this weaker player. This is kind of close actually because his PFR is only 8%. I'm going to flat because I want this other fish to flat as well. This would typically just be a 3-bet. I mean, it probably is a 3-bet because this guy, although I've tagged him pink, is actually not that fishy. He's only like 32-18, so I should really just look at the HUD there. So I think this should just be a 3-bet, kind of for value, kind of just because I'm in the small blind and don't really want to play the hand. It's not super plus EV or anything to play the hand with 0 initiative against this guy's range in the small blind anyway, so I think 3-betting would just be the way to go there. Sixes here and 9 deuce, 9-7 deuce. I'm going to go ahead and just bet it because there are just so many bad turns for me. I can sometimes get caught by worse hands here like ace high and stuff like that, and I think that, yeah, if I check back there, I'm just basically going to have to fold on an enormously huge amount of turn cards, and that's not really what I want to happen. 9-3 is very close to a call. It's probably just outside my calling range, and I'm going to 3-bet linear there because this guy likes to defend to quite a lot of 3-bets so far. So I'm not going to have that as a polar bluff. If I were polar there on table 1, I probably would have that as a bluff. And I'm going to 3x the button on table 3 with 2 fish, and going to just steal 2.5x on table 1. And yeah, ace-9 off, I mean, it's not the best hand in the world. I definitely don't want to flat it, and due to the sheer amount of hands I am going to flat here, I think because this isn't a flat, it's actually going to become an okay hand just to go ahead and 3-bet bluff with. And it's the kind of hand that if the fish do want to cold call me with like random broadways or whatever like him, at least then I have decent equity against those hands and things like that, so I think it's going to be fine. Flop's a really easy check because this is definitely not a board that I want to c-bet my whole range on. I don't really expect to get called by too many worse hands by c-betting here, and I want to protect the range of hands that doesn't have any showdown value that just wants to give up. Like maybe if I had like ace-5 of hearts, I would just give up here, so I think it's definitely a check. That's like the worst turn ever. I think if he bets his turn, we can just fold. We're going to have some Jack X in our range. We're going to have some 2-pair in our range now. We don't really need to defend middle pair with no draw, so it would be a pretty big mistake, I think, to call a turn bet here. Although he can be bluffing hands like King Queen, there aren't like an enormous amount of those combos. Like Jack X is a fairly substantial part of his range, as well as, you know, he can have all the sets here. Some 2-pair combos too, so ace-9 definitely going to be a fold. Like, you don't need to worry about folding like what's close to the bottom of your range there, especially when it's kind of hard for your opponent to have enormous amounts of air in his range. This is just a fold because this guy's like 26-3, so you can't defend. You have to be extremely careful in a spot like that with a reverse implied odds dominated kind of hand facing a 3-bet, because you're just going to be frequently playing a pot out of position with no initiative with a hand that's just crushed by your opponent's likely nutted 3-bet range. I'm going to check 6-5 just because I've already raised this guy once when he's limped here, which probably diminishes fold equity pre-flop and post-flop a little bit. On this board though, I'm going to bet really big because I just think there's so many ace highs and things that are going to call, so I'm going to bet a bit over pot. Could even bet like 2x pot there, maybe better, for value, and just continue betting on most runouts until the river, at which point, you know, I can decide whether to check or for showdown if my hands got progressively worse, or even make a thin river bet depending how the value bet, depending how the board runs out. Recently discovered League of Legends online. This game is like so addictive. If you like real-time strategy and a bit of fantasy and stuff like that, I recommend that you don't ever play this game because you'll like it so much that if you aren't already a League of Legends player, that it's going to like consume your life. I just think it's like one of the most geniusly balanced games that there is. Kind of like, you know, poker is so addictive. It's such a great game because it's just so beautifully put together. It's such a balanced and awesome game, and it just works really well. League of Legends is similar to that, so be careful about it. Like, don't play it if you have an addictive personality and like that kind of thing. Warning. It's just going to make you want to play it probably, but yeah. So I've been trying to like balance getting in that with like social life and work and stuff. It's like always like harder on your time management when you discover like a computer game that's really good. I've always had that problem throughout my life. It's dangerous territory. I call a donk bet here. I mean, I think this guy's range can be a lot of worse hands. Maybe some better nines, some pocket pairs, a bunch of draws. Definitely not ready to fold here, and I will call on some river cards, that not being one of them, because it just completes too much of the air part of his range. When he checks, he almost certainly has like 9x or ace-x, but I think he's just check calling that range, and I expect to lose here a lot, but sometimes I'll win when he's just got queen 10 and is giving up. When he checks a flush, having bet the draw for 2 streets, which is just really ridiculous. On a card where, I mean, like, come on, my betting range on that river is basically flushes. If I have Jack X, I'm definitely raising somewhere else. Okay, this is a fish, so we shouldn't expect him to play well, but just to explain why that check is horrible on the river there. I'll just quickly open these 2 hands, then explain that. My range is basically, for betting the river, is going to be like a flush, or like, I don't know, maybe ace-x. I make like some, I don't know what ace-x I ever have there. Yeah, I basically just check back the river all the time, so he should just be going for like value, basically, instead of like turning his hand into a check. It's not like I have any air, it's not like I have any combinations that I bluff on that river that I'm not calling a bet with, so yeah, it doesn't really make much sense. So I'm just going to say donk barrel twice, 2 streets with draw and check, river with flush. So it's kind of reverse player who likes to put money into the pot without a made hand, then suddenly like goes into I must slow play mode, like as soon as he This guy could actually be a reg. Like, as soon as he actually gets there, they have this sort of burning inclination just to check. And it's just completely illogical. There's no reason for it. But that's the reverse player. He's one of the easiest opponents you'll ever have to play against, basically. Just makes life very easy for you. It's like when you get the crazy maniac whose ranges are already really unbalanced towards air. Like, he's betting multiple streets all the time. Barreling turns, barreling rivers, donkeying pot on the flop, min-raising all your c-bets, that kind of thing. And then you see him, like, check the nuts. It's just like, it gives you such a clear impression that he's even more imbalanced than you thought he was at first. Ace-queen here is close, honestly. This guy makes the squeeze really big. He's squeezing into 2 fish, so I think his range is definitely linear and not very bluff-heavy here whatsoever. I think this is a fold with ace-queen off. Ace-queen suited, I think I would probably call there. A mistake I would make in the past is probably to call that squeeze. If I'm going to have a 4-bet range, I'm also going to 4-bet this hand, but honestly, I don't want a 4-bet range because I just feel like my opponent is quite a tight player already, like 3-bets 6%, folding to 70% of 3-bets himself. It's just probably not got much worse than like ace-queen plus there. Maybe it's like some ace-jack and king-queen, and I can like break even by like making a 4-bet bluff there. But honestly, I just feel like too much of his range is actually really strong, so I'm going to start off exploitably just not having a 4-bet bluff range in that spot. On this board, this guy's only folding to 41% of c-bets. I'm going to check fold this hand. It just has minimal equity. Ace high can sometimes win at showdown if it checks all the way, and I just don't really feel like I can get away with c-betting so wide out of position. Like, you might contrast that spot to the spot I played on the button earlier where I talked about how I wanted to c-bet my entire range. You can make a contrast there and say, but characters, why don't you want to c-bet your whole range in that spot? And the big difference is that we're out of position, and it's just so much easier for our opponent to float us and get to showdown with ace high and just not fold than it is out of position. Therefore, we can't really get away with just like betting everything in our range like we can when we have the holy grail of position. So that would be the difference there. And that actually, you can trace that back to your pre-flop strategy, and that's actually why you don't want to be opening as wide from the small blind as you do from the button, because you're going to be faced with this dilemma where you have less fold equity post-flop, and you just can't really make it as plus EV. There's just so many reasons why being out of position is worse. So that affects your pre-flop game, it affects your post-flop game, it means you have to give up a bit more, and it also means that if I'm check folding a hand like ace-5 here, and this is a reg, and again I'm at the level where it's important for me to branch out and think about my overall strategy, so I'm not being ridiculously exploited by his float bets, as they're called on Poker Tracker, where he stabs at the pot on the flop. I'm going to want to develop a check call range there that's substantially wide as well. So I'm going to want to check call some weak top pair, some like 7-8, that kind of thing. I might even check call like pocket 10s, pocket 7s there, because they block like a bunch of his calling range. Like my sets and things like that, or even like pocket aces. Like these hands are all reasonable check calls too. And then I'll have a c-bet range for value, a c-bet bluff range, and I'm just sort of balancing my ranges, so I'm not doing any one thing with too large a proportion of either air or value. I'm just, more balanced so that, I don't know how this guy plays, I'm out of position, I kind of want to protect myself from being exploited, so that's why I would develop a strategy like that. And it's a big mistake. One of the most common pitfalls I see my students fall into. This is thin, by the way, this open. I just feel like with a fish that's so far fit or fold post flop, very tiny sample, but it's better that he's folded once out of once than 0 out of once. I think it's just good to go ahead and open. I'm gonna make a value bet / protection bet on this flop. I just feel like he's folding the flop so much that checking back and having to navigate turns when he starts leading, and I don't know about his leading ranges, is not going to be so good. Now, however, we should definitely check, and on that river we can fold because this is an airless range river. It basically, not that fish can never have air here, but when the 5 of clubs rolls off, his range right on the flop is going to be mainly things like draws, gut shots, random stuff like that, top pair, second pair, whatever. When this card falls in the river, it creates a kind of airless situation where any air in his range that would have 0 showdown value would need to bluff has either made a really strong hand or picked up at least a pair when it's a gut shot with like 5-3, 5-6, 5-8. So having third pair here now is a bluff catcher against an airless range, and that is just not a spot you ever want to call in. And it's a good one just to remember that paradigm, that pattern, and make sure you're kind of respecting it. When a card completes loads of draws and or gives showdown value to draws, your opponent's range becomes significantly more airless, and therefore your ability to bluff catch is, severely reduced. 7-9 is way too good to turn into a 3-bet bluff, although I will be polarized so far against someone that's folding 50% to 3-bets. That's going to be a call on table 2. And the flop is an easy call too. I mean, I have a gut shot. I flopped like one of the, not the better hands for me. It's not the best flop for me, but I have too much equity in the long game to actually just fold there. I think when I flop any kind of equity at all, they're in position I should be floating because his range is super wide. He's probably c-betting a lot of it. And yeah, this is definitely a spot where I'll bet turn bet river if I get checked to here, because I have a lot of good hands here as well. You know, I have like some Jack X floats, I have like some 10x, some 2 pair now, and on a bunch of rivers my range is actually going to get even stronger. When he bets again, I mean, I have better hands in my range that I can turn into a bluff here. Raising like a hand this weak as a bluff kind of makes my range pretty wide. I mean, I'd be repping like sets and Jack 10. It's not like loads of combos either. So I think we can fold this part of our flop calling range and maybe turn something with a bit better equity into bluff there, like some kind of weak flush draw or something like that. We can also just call again and look to take it away on the river, or even bluff raise the river when we have a bit more equity there. We don't even need a turn raising range necessarily, because we can sort of protect the rest of our range there just by calling turns because we have position. Again, position lets us afford this luxury. I hope that makes sense. It's just like I have, like, why would you call the flop? If you look at this in a kind of vacuum, like kind of results orientated way, where you're only looking at one branch on the EV tree, you might say, oh well, you just like called pre, called the flop, folded the turn, you've just given them lots of money, and that's just a ridiculously short-sighted thing to think, because we're on just one little branch of the EV tree. There are so many different things that can happen, and oftentimes he's giving up the turn. Oftentimes we get a better turn card for us that improves our range in a better way. This is kind of close, honestly. I think this is a call with eights, just about. The fish will come along. The fish is short, which is not great for us, but with pocket eights, I think our implied odds plus ability to actually have the best hand on some boards and the presence of the fish just mean that we can't really fold. I'm going to go ahead and punish here with 6-7. It's a bit better than the sort of, I don't know, 6-4 or whatever I had last time. This guy's range is pretty strong. Like, okay, this is a guy that squeezed before. Like, we have seen him squeeze before. Do I want a 4-bit bluff range here? Yes, given that he's ramped up the aggression a little bit here, I'm going to go ahead and use this hand as a 4-bet. I mean, this is not an absolute drooler. If this guy was a huge, huge drooler, I would definitely consider, like, slow playing my hand there. But I think getting it in against the likes of ace king and stuff and queens or whatever is just way too important, given this guy's range is tight. If this is a massive drooler, then you kind of tips the scales a little bit in the opposite direction, and then his range is going to be more things like, or my range, rather, is going to, I'm going to want this guy's, I'll start that again, I'm just like muddling my words. If this is a huge drooler, say he's like 65-18 instead of 32-18, he's going to be folding way less of his range to that squeeze when I just call. So the value of actually having this player in the pot, if he's a bigger fish, goes way up. Whereas when he's only 32-18 and he's only like a semi-fish reg kind of guy, bad player for sure, but not a massive drooler, given this guy's quite tight and is only 3-betting 7% and probably has a linear range due to the presence of this fish, getting it all in pre-flop with aces goes way, way, way up in value, because it's just likely we get it in very often against hands we're completely annihilating. If we had like queens, I would just call there because we're not getting it in the kind of shape where we're annihilating anyone. With aces, you know, we're just absolutely crushing his range, and moreover, he's probably folding to our 4-bet relatively infrequently. So those are the factors. How strong is this guy's range for one? The more air he has, the more inclined we are to flat there with aces because we don't get it in that often, although we are crushing when we do. Fold to 4-bet 25%, very low 3-bet stat. I'll just fold king 9. I don't have a 4-bet bluff range there by default because that guy seems to be super unbalanced. Someone has an ace here a bit too often for me to like bet king high on this turn with no equity when called. It doesn't really make any sense. I'm gonna just go ahead and isolate this fish. I don't know who he is yet. He's on a mobile device. I've got ace 10 suited at head position. I'd rather isolate the fish than call there, gain the initiative, pick up some fold equity on flops where I miss. Betting this river's not out of the question because when this guy has an ace, he's usually going to go ahead and check. I just don't know how wide Encanto Shine is going to call me, and King Jack can actually win at showdown sometimes, so I think a check is fine. I'm just going to fold the flop to that donk. I mean, I could like raise there or something. I just don't really know this guy, and I feel like when they dunk like half pot in a 3-bet pot, they're typically not folding to a raise in my experience, but it will vary from fish to fish for sure. another spot on table 3, obviously, where we just want to c-bet absolutely everything in our range here against the fish and just expect to pick it up often enough. If I bet half pot there, which I do, or just over, I only need to pick up the pot like 33% if I had no equity. It's good to just know these kind of percentages, guys. Half pot, risk, reward, you know, has to work a third of the time. And obviously, like, I do have equity. Like, I have 2 overcards to a bunch of his calling range. I have like some backdoor straight draws and things like that. This is definitely a clear squeeze. I'll make it rather large. I want to discourage the reg from coming along here. That's my vacuum reason for going pretty large. He 4-bets. He hasn't really been 4-betting very much so far. This is kind of close. Like, honestly, I feel like people 4-bet bluff quite a bit in these games. 17 in the pot. If I shove here, I'm risking about 45 to pick that up. I do have some equity when called. He 4-bets very, very quickly though. Flatting is an option as well, given I'm getting a really nice price, and I might go with that, just given I don't really know. I'm going to just flat here, because I don't really know what his range is. If he'd 4-bet already, or I just had a bit more indication that he was like a bit lighter, I would just ship there, and expect it just to kind of print me some money. But without that being the case, I think the safer option is just to be flatting that part of my range, because when you snap 4-bets, with the presence of the fish in the pot, it could just be that his range doesn't contain bluffs, but I'm getting such good pot odds there that I don't think I can fold a hand as good as ace-queen, so that's why I flat there. So he makes a 6x ISO of this fish's min open, which I really don't like, because like he should actually want action here, unless he knows that this fish just can't fold pre-flop ever. Then I think 6x is just risking folding out a bit too much of the fish's range. Queen jack suited, we kind of just have to let this go with this guy being super tight. We could like throw this in as like a cold call, a light cold call, I guess, expecting to get a bunch of respect post flop, and you know, just expecting that this guy will fold a fair amount of the time. We'll be heads up against a nit who's going to play kind of fair fold. That could work, but I think it's just going to be a fold until we see that he can actually have a widest range there. But if I had a hand like jacks, queens, ace king, like it's definitely just getting shipped over the 4-bet. Ace queen is close, honestly. It might not be a bad ship, but the kind of snap timing, the small sizing, the fish being there, I just feel like it's a bit more likely than normal that I'm not getting enough fold equity to ship ace queen. Just to paint you guys a picture, to ship ace queen there, I would probably need somewhere around 60% fold equity, probably, with the stacks being as they were. That's a guess. We could work that out if we had a bit more time off the table. And do I get folds that often? I'm not sure that I do. The reason for that is that I don't need as much as I'm actually risking, because it's not like I have 0 equity when called. I have probably like 27% or something against jacks plus ace king when called. So with like 27% equity or whatever, that's going to allow me to win the pot sometimes, even when he is not folding to my sort of 5-bet, light 5-bet if you like. It's a clear squeeze here. This guy's folding a lot to 3-bets, and the fish is just going to have a really weak range, and it's, if he calls, whatever, fine. But he's going to fold a lot as well, is my point. This guy makes a huge, like, a fairly huge 3-bet here. Definitely don't want to 4-bet and get jacks in, but it's going to be too strong to just fold right away. Even though the guy's a passive. He's probably not going to be 3-betting like a super wide range there. I don't really see any reason to raise this turn. Like, there are some cards that might slow him down a bit, but I doubt there are cards that are actually going to make him fold like ace king. So I think it's definitely just a call in position if he is bluffing. It's not too likely that he's bluffing, but we'll just allow him to continue doing that. I just want to make a bet now on table 1 that's big enough to set up stacks for the river, but it's not going to like necessarily frighten away too much of his range right now. I think 13 should do the trick. That's going to put like 26, 40, yeah, 26 into 46, which gives him a really good price here. And just should make it kind of impossible for him to fold any ace-x. Just get the sizing right so that we don't create an inflection point where he wants to fold on either street, basically. Go ahead and... oh wow, he just gets in with king, so that's kind of nice for us. We get 4-bet by the tight guy so far, so we just fold our 3-bet bluff hand on table 2. On table 3... yeah, I'm just going to keep checking. I just feel like fold equity is just insufficient here. I feel like this guy might even call like an underpair or something. We make like the uber disguised nuts in the river, which is kind of nice. Queen 10 here. This guy's been pretty active so far. This is really close. Like, it's kind of on the fringe. I'm going to go ahead and just fold for now. If I have a bigger sample where he's 3-betting 10% or higher than 10%, I would defend that hand. But given he's small blind as well, he's a bit more likely to be linear and we're a bit more likely to be dominated. I just want to get called by like hands like pocket 8s here and stuff, so I'm just going to bet just under a 6. I think that's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to make a typical note on this fish. I'm going to change him to passive fish. I had him as aggro fish, but that was very passive what he did there, so he gets a status change, I guess. And I'm going to type a note that he does not stab in a 3-bet pot on a high board. It's good to know the fish that are going to just bet their whole range at you there on the turn when you check, and the ones who are just going to play fair or fold. It's useful. Fish kind of stacks off with like opening straight around the flop. Hopefully reloads, we'll see. I mean, this guy's line here is obviously just horrible. I mean, in this hand, like he bets the flop, which I don't hate. I mean, he can get called by some worse hands, it's possible. And he might not want to go into check call mode where he sort of turns his hand face up. It's a board you'll want to see bet a lot. Let's pretend he's actually a good player with a good thought process just for a second here. King Queen, table 2, very easy 3-bet for value against the fish. He's opening 4%, which sucks, but gaining the initiative here is quite important when he's so fair or fold post flop. We're just going to be able to win way more than our fair share of pots, and we're going to connect very well with flops too. And it's not like his range is actually going to be like 2% of hands there. It's going to be wider than that on the button there. Like a fish might be tight for a while, and then he just picks up 2 cards he likes, he'll raise. I mean, it's not to say that you need to take that stat completely literally. Like, of course you don't. This is an easy mine where we get to cold call a fish min 3-bet because the guy probably has like a range that he's going to spew with post flop when he like 3-bets here. So when we flop a set, it's just like we only need to make like 10 times our investment in total for that to be good. So we need to make like $25 on average when we flop a set, and I think we just do that easily. And then the fact that he stacks off on the turn and river as well, like check calls a turn, which I mean, I don't hate, but this is an example of not being aware of your own image, because if you're going to play that passively, and then people like call your 3-bet, and then call a c-bet on ace-jack 3, the chances are they have a pretty strong range. So for him then to check call the turn is just not good, and for him to like check call turn and river all in is just not a good idea. But I think my sizing was just about right there, without being like big-headed. I think the sizing was perfect, because what it did was, against his range like weak ace-x, pocket kings, pocket queens, which is a lot of his range. When I say weak ace-x, actually I mean like ace-queen. I guess that he's never folding anyway. But against hands like kings and queens, right, these are the inflection hands that could go either way. He could fold them by the river, he could not. Against those hands, we definitely want to create the kind of situation where we're giving him a decent price on the turn so he doesn't feel like he can fold yet. But when he calls turn, he's going to be like quite pot committed by the river and might make a lighter call on the river that he wouldn't normally make. I'm going to fold ace 10. If this guy I was sure he was more tilted and he'd started opening super wide under the gun, I would 3-bet it, but ace 10 off is too weak to ISO 3-bet against the fish there, and I can't call. So then he's getting like, 3-1 on the river. He's going to click call with a bunch of those hands, I think. So the sizing, I think there's a lesson in sizing there for sure. Because if you like pot the turn, then he's going to think, oh, if I call turn, I have to call a river. And that kind of thought process might make him fold pocket kings on the turn, or pocket queens for that matter, or whatever. Definitely could. Whereas if you bet turn too small, like you bet turn like $7, then you leave a massive river shove where he can go, okay, I'm not pot committed, I get to fold. So just be careful that you like give him a good price, but not too good of a price on each street. Because the better price you give him on the turn, the worse price you give him on the river, and vice versa. This is close to another squeeze, but I think it's a little bit too weak. I think this fish is calling me all the time. This guy might start to get annoyed or whatever and start like 4-betting me at some point as well. So I'm just going to like tighten up a little bit there. I think king 8 would be a little bit out of line. Call with 8's very standard on table 2. Not really much to say. Susanna is on the offensive, calling people fish. She is a crazy woman. Do not want to get on the wrong side of Susanna with 2 Z's and 2 N's. Definitely not. Speaking of girls in poker, I will be releasing the next series of Coaching Patchouli, where we'll catch up with my girlfriend and see how she's been doing at the tables of late. She's had another resurgence in poker where she's like picked it up again and had a bit more time to get back into the game, so that should be interesting. Always good when we can do a video with poker playing females because they're a rare breed, or at least in the online world of sort of poker communities, I guess. Plenty of famous ones out there in the poker celeb scene. Definitely going to be a 3-bet to isolate this guy. Again, like you can say about characters, this guy's only opening 14%. Why are you 3-betting 10-9 suited for value? It's not technically for value, it's more for isolation. It's because I think in position with such a playable hand against his range that's not super tight, I don't think, then I'm going to just do really, really well here by 3-betting and gaining the initiative to c-bet and win more pots than I would by just flatting. So, and if he folds pre, that's obviously fine too. So yeah, these games are pretty good, and this is the real importance of table selection. If I was just to just jump in the lobby and just get on a few absolutely random tables or whatnot, like I wouldn't be doing so well. Like if we open like a random table here, it's just like reg, like 4 or 5 regs and a short stack fish. So if you don't table select, you're basically just getting on the average table for your games, whereas a table such as, okay, this one I would switch out if I wasn't making a video, table 2, but a table such as table 3 here, where we've got 1, 2, 3 weaker players, this is definitely the kind of table that is way above the average standard for Monday afternoon on PokerStars 50NL. So if you're playing that table, it's like you're playing against a 10NL or 25NL player pool. We've also got like a weak reg here who's just like folding too much to 3-bets, like by a mile and stuff like that. So given that, I mean, this is way, way above the average standard for a table, which is much, much better. And it's like you're playing 50NL stakes in 10NL games, and that's the whole point of table selection. Is actually gives you this avenue to actually play against much weaker competition as if you were playing a lower stake when you're not. This is just weird. Like why anyone has a raising range on this flop is just kind of bizarre. I'd imagine that there's just a lot of full of shitness going on here, to be honest. This guy's probably gonna like give up now, he's just got air. Okay, I'm like making massive assumptions. I don't even know this guy. Could be a fish that's just like overplaying like pocket tens. Probably is actually when he shoves turn. When I take a look at this hand, I just explain why, theoretically speaking, it doesn't make any sense for either player to be raising this flop and why it's probably just theoretically bad. So let's get into that. Let's critique their weird lines. So cutoff opens 2.5x, big blind calls. I assume big blind's a fish here from what we just saw. And big blind checks, cutoff bets really small, big blind raises. So big blind's range here is not actually a range that wants to raise. He has very, very few value combos. He has some 8x, sure, like 7-8, ace-8 suited maybe. He doesn't have much 8x whatsoever. Just like this board here, I don't have that many strong hands on this in table 2, therefore it doesn't really make sense for me to raise. So this would just be a check call, as would any hand in my range that I'm not check folding. And so, when big blind raises this flop, I'll just play these hands first and I'll get back to that. There's a little bit too much going on right now for me to keep cutting in and out. This guy's like a net, okay, but, you know, it's button versus big blind, and I just have a hand that's way, way too strong in my range to consider folding. River is, like, close to whether I raise or not if he bets here. Does he have 6-8? I mean, it's possible. Like, he's quite tight so far, but he can definitely have 6-8. He can definitely have overpairs. He can definitely have Queen X. He could have sets as well. Can I get called by enough worse hands if I raise here? I don't know. He seems really tight, but this sizing, yeah, I really want to raise against this sizing. I'm not going to make it too big. I'm probably going to raise fold, even though that seems kind of sick. Let's not show 2 cards here. Let's just see if this guy is like a reg or what he is. Yeah, he's playing loads of tables, so we'll assume he's a reg. I'm going to check call ace king here. I have like 2 good overcards, like some of the best showdown value I can really have. It'd be better if I had like a backdoor draw or something for sure. And we can fold on the queen of clubs turn. We have some check calls that have queens in them, like ace queen, king queen, backdoor flush draw maybe there as well. So And we can check call like some of our weak top pair as well. It's definitely not out of the question. Like our 7x basically. So he does call with aces. That's the kind of hand we're trying to get called by. If he'd made that river like pot size, then I think we're really in a kind of situation where we can't raise. It's kind of unfortunate. But when he pots the river, he's basically saying I have like straights and sets. I might have some overpairs too. And he should pot his overpairs there. It's just a much better line because when he makes this imbalanced mistake of just showing me that his range is likely, you know, like not the nuts and not air, like that bet size of half pot that he makes in the river just really looks a lot like, from what I know about the population, it just looks a lot like this is going to be a 4-bet for me because this guy, I should go bigger. I didn't realize the stack sizes. That's kind of bad. 9-7's close, honestly. Getting a pretty good price here with a fish in the pot. I'm going to call. I'm not loving it, but I think it's probably fine. King 10. I'm going to start by... I could like check raise here, that's possible. Stacks are not good for it. If we were a bit shorter, like we were just 100 deep and now at 40 BBs left, at 80 BBs left, I'd probably just check raise all in with this hand and a bunch of other hands in my range. As is, I'm going to just start by betting. And I think we have to fold to the pot size dunk here. It's not really, we're not really looking to flop middle pair and about their flush draw. We're more looking to flop like hands we can actually stack off with against the fish. So he flats the 4-bet. Like normally in that kind of situation, I would just check that flop with my whole range and stuff, because I have a lot of hands that are not super comfortable here. Like ace, I don't know, maybe ace king just wants to bet. Actually, it probably does with its equity. Probably doesn't want to check call. So ace king wants to bet. Aces and kings without clubs probably want to bet as well because they're somewhat vulnerable. So I guess it does make sense to have like the c-bet range going on there. And king 10, yeah, it's got a bunch of equity. It's a good semi-bluff, so I guess it should be in that c-bet range for sure. So I think that's fine. I should 4-bet bigger because I'm just letting him like mine me with a lot of stuff there that deep, kind of making it okay for him to call given stack sizes because we are like, before the hand we're like 140 BBs deep. So my 4-bet size here should be like at least like 1250, I would say. Instead of 1050 and actually generate a bit more fold equity. The reason I didn't flat was just that, I mean I could have flatted, but we are like hijack against, I can't really fold 10-8 off for that price. We're hijack against button there or whatever, and so his range is probably a little bit stronger, and so king 10 would be a fine call button versus big blind, but it's not so good like out of position against his 3-bet range when I'm in that position. When I'm in the hijack, his range will just be a lot stronger. So coaching with Chuli is going to be back soon. Stay tuned for that, it should be exciting. When I'm linear, my opponents don't really know this. It's not something I do all the time, but because I have a linear strategy here, I'm typically going to be making my 3-bet bigger, and that's because I'll be shoving a higher percentage of my 3-bet range, and it means that when he 4-bet folds, I pick up more dead money. That's one reason. Another reason is just that because I'm doing it basically exclusively for value when I'm using a linear range, it makes a hell of a lot of sense for me to just use a bigger sizing in general. Just get more money in the pot for value, make it worse for my opponent to call me with speculative holdings, that kind of thing. I think I have to just go to Value Town. This guy's range is wide. He has a lot of Jack X, like pocket 10s, pocket 9s in his range. I'm definitely calling turn, possibly calling river as well. I'm going to make turn big, just setting up river stacks for a shove. This is quite high up in my range now. If he has ace jack, there's not really so much I can do about it. I definitely think that this is going to be a value triple off, basically. I mean, it depends also how much he actually goes to showdown and what I know about him. If he's like really nitty and I think he's folding a lot of rivers, then that's a kind of annoying card. But I think now we beat ace jack, like king, queen jack definitely calls us. I think we have to shove this for value. We don't want to check call, we don't want to check fold. If he's like a super net, oh wow, he actually like tanks with that hand, really? Like why wouldn't you just snap? I don't understand. People are just so ridiculous sometimes. Like you can tell the guy's actually like, oh my god, he has king 10. Some of the nets in these games, like they tank for so long with like these second nuts in a gigantic pot where they're completely pot committed and things like that. It's just like, wow, really. If he was hugely nitty, we can definitely formulate a plan where we check back some rivers there, because it's going to be hard to get called, or sorry, we check fold some rivers there. on like heart cards and stuff where we don't make top 2 pair and things like that, I think check folding would be okay. But as it is on most runouts there, I think we just need to go ahead and be betting. This guy's not got a super wide 3-bet range. I think ace jack's still too good to fold. Button versus big blind to the 3-bet. Table 2, this is like a clear bet for value on the flop. On the turn rather, when I float flop, when I call flop and he checks. And on table 1, we've got like a 4-way pot, and I mean, this is a hand that you'd never fold to a c-bet if you were heads up, but 4-way it's like a really mandatory fold, and it just sort of, it just shows the difference in your strategy when you're playing like 4-handed. Like the multi-wayness is just so bad for you that your hand goes way down in value. So some students of mine, like, hopefully not these days, but when I first got my hands on them, might like call that flop and not really appreciate enough how much this guy's range is tighter when you're 4-way, and just how much likely it is that someone has a better hand. Sounds kind of simple, but it's easy to overlook it like in the heat of the decision making in game, so definitely fold there. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today, guys. I hope this has been a useful live play video, and let me know if there's anything else, any themes you want covered. Leave me your feedback, comments, questions, whatever. You can get in touch with me if you need to by, I'm just going to bring up my details. This is like my Carrot Poker podcast, which is the other thing I want to actually advertise to you guys today. It's not really advertising because it's a free thing. But if you go to YouTube and search Carrot Poker, sorry about the flashing there, my computer went a bit crazy, or if you go into iTunes and search Carrot Poker, you'll find my channel. So it's like free content podcasts, just much like the Grinder School podcast channel, but it's my own one. And if you're looking for coaching, I am still doing that, and my writing and grinding and things like that full time. So get in touch with me at admin@carrotcorner.com, or have a look at my website at carrotcorner.com, and I hope to see you guys on the forums and the video threads, and hope to hear from you soon. Good luck in your grind, and see you in the next video.